Good morning. My name is Kimberly Criswell, and I'm the dietitian that works in the outpatient clinic. So if you happen to ever know anyone, or you yourself are ever referred for a nutrition appointment with a dietitian, I would be the person that you would see. And I'm here today to talk to you about basically the fuel that you need, or the nutrition that you need for your exercise or your active lifestyle. So I've kind of broken it down into two parts. I'm going to first describe the kind of fuel that you need, or the nutrition that you need prior to starting your exercise, the things that your body is going to find the most useful. And then I'm going to describe what kind of things you need after exercise. Okay? And if you have any questions through the whole thing, please, raise your hand or get my attention, and we can stop right there and answer questions as they come into your mind. Okay? All right, so I'm just going to get started here. Now, before you start exercising, what you're mainly going to need is some kind of carbohydrate, and you're going to need to be well hydrated by drinking water or some other types of fluids. So carbohydrate, the reason why you need this, carbohydrate is your muscle fuel, and it is also your brain fuel. So that's very critical. When you don't eat enough carbohydrate, you would probably have symptoms of a low blood sugar. Does anybody know what that feels like? What kind of thing, how would you feel if your blood sugar is low?
Just a little shaky.
Shaky, yes.
Tired,
yes.
no focus.
Right? You're not as alert, you're not as focused. You might get dizzy, you might notice a rapid heartbeat. Yes, back there, did you have something?
Nausea, tachycardia,
Yes.
dizziness.
Yes.
My mother and I get hypoglycemic, so we have to know that.
You have to be very careful about that. Right, so to prevent that, you need regular intake of carbohydrate, because all of those things, and beyond those, even maybe feeling hungry and having food cravings, maybe feeling a little bit irritable, they call it hangry now, I heard. All of those things might make you feel like not exercising. So it's harder to get started if you feel like that, right? So then you also will need some water. And water helps transport nutrients throughout your body and your blood. Water would help you to rid your body of waste in your urine. And water would help to cool your body when you sweat. So basically, you really need water for just about every chemical reaction or process that your body does in a day. And so, you need water basically for your blood, sweat, and tears. And if you are dehydrated, how do you feel? Do you know how you feel then? Yes?
Similar symptoms, nausea, headache, lethargy.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to feel very hot.
Mm-hmm.
Hot, dry, parched.
Mm-hmm.
Dizziness, lethargy, headache.
Right.
Malaise.
Right. So also
I
then,
also think confusion. I
right.
was diagnosed in the ER with dehydration. It was very, very scary.
Mm-hmm. Because
I had no idea what was wrong.
right, you just can't function, right?
You're right.
And so, the most common things people will feel would be, as y'all said, fatigue, lethargy, headache, dizzy, lightheaded, things like that. And then going into more severe dehydration, the confusion and things like that will start to set in. So also, you will not feel like starting an exercise program or starting to exercise when you feel like that. And then we get down to the topic of how much carbohydrate do you need for fuel. In general, you need about 15 grams of carbohydrate every time you're about to embark on about 30 minutes of solid exercise at a moderate intensity. And by solid exercise, it's referring to some kind of continuous movement. So if you're going to, for example, walk briskly or jog or swim for 30 minutes solid, then you're probably going to be burning up at least 15 grams of carbohydrate. And then the next point below that, if you're going to do 30 minutes of solid exercise at a high intensity, you're probably going to burn more like 30 to 50 grams of carbohydrate for fuel. So to put that in perspective in terms of real food, who knows what kind of foods give you a good source of carbohydrate? When you think of, yes, back in the back.
Whole grains.
Rings, what?
Whole grains.
Oh, whole grains, right? Yes. So whole grains or any other starchy food like corn or peas or potatoes or legumes, and by legumes I mean dried or canned beans, peas or lentils. Those are going to give you some carbohydrate. Anything else? Fruits, yes. You'll always get carbohydrate from your fruits. And then the other thing would be your dairy products. So when we look in terms of knowing you're needing probably about 15 grams of carbohydrate for a half hour of exercise, I've brought with me some examples of portions of food, like a visual of a portion of food where you can get about 15 grams of carbohydrate. So in terms of fruit, if you eat a tennis ball sized piece of fruit, or it looks a lot like your fist or one handful, you can get about 15 grams of carbohydrate from that. And that could be a small banana, or it could be a piece of fruit. It could also just be a handful of fruit. Because when you're eating something like grapes or cherries or blueberries, if you can fill your hand with it, it's probably about the size of a tennis ball. Then that's going to give you 15 grams of carbohydrate from fruit. Also from dairy products, if you have a 6-ounce yogurt cup, so that's the typical size that they will put yogurt in the grocery store. If it's a light or a plain yogurt, that means they haven't added a lot of extra sugar to it. So that's usually going to give you about 15 grams of carbohydrate. If they sweetened it, it might be doubled the amount of carbohydrate. Or put fruit on the bottom, which they've sweetened, it might be about double. An 8-ounce glass of milk will probably give you 12 to 15 grams. The fruit naturally has fructose, that's the fruit sugar that naturally occurs, and milk naturally has lactose. Has anyone heard of maybe lactose intolerance? That's when someone has a little bit of difficulty digesting the lactose or the sugar or carbohydrate in milk. And then you had mentioned the whole grains. You're also going to get 15 grams from about a standard slice of bread or a third of a cup of a whole grain pasta or rice. And when it comes to your starchy vegetables, if you eat a half a cup of potato, or if you eat half a cup of something like corn or peas or a legume, you would get that 15 grams approximately. And with your legumes, if you have maybe a really thick soup that you've made, like one example is kidney beans that you've put into chili, about a half a cup will give you that 15 grams. And if you've taken a legume like a chickpea and made it into hummus, about a third of a cup will give you that same 15 grams of carbohydrate. So there's quite a bit of variety of ways that you can get your carbohydrate to fuel your exercise. And if you look at those pieces of food as just being one unit, maybe you eat one before you exercise, maybe you eat two if you're going to exercise a little bit longer or at a little bit of a higher intensity. Now, what is one of the reasons why, well, first of all, before I move on, does anyone have any questions about carbohydrate? Yes?
I'm not going to do it, but I wonder, athletes like tennis players or whatever, how they pack calories. How does that work?
Well,
what does that mean?
What they'll do is the night before, they'll eat quite a bit of carbohydrate so that they can store something called glycogen in their muscles and their liver. And then the morning of, especially a couple hours before, they'll eat large amounts of carbohydrate based on the amount of time and the intensity of their exercise. Then directly before, a lot of athletes have trained their stomachs to be able to handle eating carbohydrate and not getting stomach cramps. So then what they'll do is they'll eat directly before and during the period of physical activity to continue to fuel their body. Is that what you were
Well,
thinking
yeah,
of?
you know, if you watch, I watch professional tennis, but, the Olympics or anything, they talk about that, and I was never really sure how they did it.
Yeah, they have a very good idea of how much
I mean, that's very
fuel.
important, if you're in,
Absolutely.
professional.
Right, because they need to be alert. For something like tennis or any other sport, they need to be alert and they need to be strong. So that's very important. Yes, in the back here?
I had a friend who was a Navy SEAL, and he said because of the intensity of their training and activity, they would go through several pounds of carbohydrates each per day.
Yes.
Also, I really like, it's weird, but I find lentil soup is very good in the winter before exercise because of the legumes.
Absolutely.
I love lentil soup.
I very much agree with that. Legumes they're rich in protein, they're rich in fiber, so we call them a very complex, slowly digesting carbohydrate. So they met out that energy slowly over time.
Feed you for a long time.
Right, they feed you for a long time. I think they're one of the most optimal sources of carbohydrate. Excellent. Any other questions or thoughts? Yes.
About 20 years ago, the owner of Heartline Health and Fitness told me the most efficient way to burn fat was do your cardio in the morning before you eat anything.
Huh?
And he used, something you just said fit right in, that he said that'll force your body to burn its stored energy, and he talked about pulling the glycogen out of your liver.
Right?
And he said that'll be the most efficient way of burning fat. So I don't.
You
it
could
sounds
go
like
that way.
It sounds like that goes against the grain of.
Well, maybe he's burning what you ate the night before instead of what you ate right before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the theory as I gathered it.
Hey, as long as you have enough energy, you can try that, right?
I have done that, and it doesn't seem to cause a problem. When
Very
he first
good.
said it to me, I thought, wow, that's crazy.
Mhm.
I'm used to eating a big breakfast first thing in the morning. That's the only way to start.
Right? Hey, but if you feel well, it's working for you.
It does seem to work. At least it doesn't cause the problems I thought it might. So I was curious so okay, it's not totally out of line.
That's right, that's right. Now, what is perhaps one of the reasons why you wouldn't want to eat a lot right before you exercise? What's the number one thing that, what were you thinking?
Gastric reflux.
Right, gastric reflux or any kind of gastrointestinal distress. So you'll have some people have gastric reflux, you'll have some people get stomach cramps, you'll have some people actually get diarrhea if they eat directly prior to exercising, especially if the exercise that you're going to be doing involves your abdominal region. So if you're running, if you're walking rapidly, if you're swimming, if you're doing yoga or Pilates, you'll probably notice that you're more likely to get some gastric distress. So that is the reason why a lot of people, if they're going to add a snack, they'll add it a full 1 or 2 hours prior to starting the exercise. Or they'll exercise 1 or 2 hours after eating a meal so that you don't have that kind of discomfort. The other thing is that when you add a lot of protein and fat to a meal, you're going to see a delay in your stomach emptying. So you're going to see that you're more likely to feel the cramping and the stomach discomfort. When you think of protein and fat, what kind of foods do you think of?
Meat.
Meat? What were you thinking back there?
Definitely meat products and some dairy.
Yes, meat and dairy.
About nuts.
Nuts, yes, they have protein and fat in them. So for example, if someone were to wake up and just have some toast for breakfast, or toast and fruit, a little bit of yogurt, and exercise, they're probably going to be a lot more comfortable than if they wake up and they have sausage and bacon and eggs and the toast and the fruit, and then they go and exercise, because they're going to be much more likely to have that gastric distress. So that's something to keep in mind. That's why I'm encouraging more towards the carbohydrates before exercise, because they'll digest and empty from your stomach more rapidly, and also leaving that length of time unless you have specifically trained your stomach to be able to eat and then exercise, which you would probably do very slowly. If you want to train your stomach, you'd probably start out with something liquid, maybe even an electrolyte drink. This is a tablespoon like you would use to measure sugar or something when you were baking. If this tablespoon was filled level with sugar or honey or syrup or candy, it would have about the same amount of carbohydrate as one of these whole, tennis ball sized pieces of food that I described here. But it would be able to digest very quickly and easily, and you would see a much more rapid spike in your blood sugar. We call this more of a simple sugar because it's simple, it's already broken down, and it's quick and easy for your body to use for fuel. So if someone's drinking an electrolyte drink, like a sports drink, right before exercise, that's going to be digested and used very quickly. If they're eating a smoothie, maybe even, that's at least liquid, that'll be digested a little more readily. And then if you're using a solid food, that's going to take a little longer yet to digest. So that's something to keep in mind for your comfort, basically. And then the other thing regarding the timing of snacks, it depends on what your goal is as far as even your body weight. Sometimes someone is exercising because they would like to burn more calories in a day because they're interested in a little bit of a weight loss. Well, then it might be more useful for that person to exercise within an hour or two after a meal that they were planning on eating anyway. Whereas if someone's more interested in maybe gaining weight or even maintaining their body weight, that person would probably want to add extra food. So they would want to add that extra snack prior to exercising. And then if you notice there's a very long stretch of time between eating, with more than 4 or 5 hours, that's another time where it's useful to add that snack prior to starting your exercise. Does anyone have any questions on your comfort or the timing of your food? Yes?
I really find that I do well if I eat a handful of nuts before I exercise. That seems kind of counterintuitive, but I find it works for me.
Well,
So-
that's good. You always have to personalize and use your own intuition, right? Okay. Now, does anyone have any other comments?
I had sort of an interesting thing in I sort of hurt my left knee.
Okay.
Dancing, home alone.
I hope you were having fun.
I was all by myself. I put on some great music and I was going to town. And so it's been exactly a week since I've been to the gym. This is my first day back. But during that week, I just wasn't hungry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've never gone a whole week and really not felt hungry. I ate, but it was because I thought it better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe that's the answer. We just don't need to eat. No, I'm not kidding.
Use your intuition, right? Eat when you're hungry until you're full, and then you're okay.
Yeah, it's just I've never experienced that before.
Mm-hmm.
But keep on dancing.
Keep on dancing, that's right. Now, just a note on the amount of hydration that you need. As a general rule, you've probably heard this before, it's good to start out with about 64 ounces of fluid in a day. However, if you're sweating profusely, you probably need more fluid. If you feel that your mouth is dry or your lips are dry, you probably need more fluid. If your urine is dark in color, or concentrated, or you notice that you're very infrequently going to the bathroom, you probably need more fluid. So that is a way to gauge whether or not you're hydrated. And so you could always add to that 64 ounces. Does anyone have any questions on hydration? Okay. Now I'd like to move on to the topic of after physical activity. What kind of fuel do you need? We already spoke about carbohydrate. Where can you get carbohydrate? Why do you need carbohydrate prior to physical activity? After physical activity, the carbohydrate will restore those glycogen stores in your body. So your body will want to put that back. Your body can be trained to store more glycogen if you're more physically active, or if you're physically active for a longer period of time. So your body will adapt to storing more glycogen. And so that's a good reason to eat some carbohydrate after your physical activity. You need protein also after physical activity, and this is for repairing or building muscle. If, really right after you've done physical activity, and especially if it's very intense, your muscles are going to be a sponge for that protein, and they're going to use it for healing and building. Now, this is the amount of protein it's estimated that you need. You will hear a lot of variability on this amount, but as a general rule for an adult recreational exerciser, the amount of protein that you need is probably 1 to 1.5 grams of protein for each kilogram of your body weight. Without taking the time to do that calculation, most people need in the ballpark of 60 to 100 grams of protein in a day. Just to put that in perspective, we already said what foods we get protein from. Probably you're going to notice that nuts have protein, legumes have protein, meat and dairy products have protein, so do eggs, and any food made of those ingredients would have some protein. Just to put in perspective that you might need in the ballpark of 60 to 100 grams of protein in a day, if you were to eat a piece of meat, and you can see this, we'll pretend this is a piece of meat, is about the size and thickness of the palm of my hand. And that is a 3-ounce piece of meat. And when you eat a 3-ounce piece of meat, and here's another example of a 3-ounce piece of meat, you're going to get about 21 grams of protein. So if you were to eat nothing but meat for your protein, and you were to eat 3 pieces of this in a day, you've probably gotten enough protein. And if you eat 3 eggs, you're going to get the same protein as a 3-ounce piece of meat. If you eat 3/4 of a cup of cottage cheese, you're going to get the same protein as this piece of meat. If you eat 3 ounces of cheese, which would be 3 large blocks or 6 slices of cheese, you'll get the same protein as this piece of meat. So that's one way that you can get your protein in a day. Also, when you have an 8-ounce glass of milk or a 6-ounce yogurt, you're probably going to get about 8 grams. And you can pretend this is chickpeas. When you have a 1/2 cup of a legume, you're probably going to get about 7 grams of protein. So all of these things would contribute to the amount of protein that you get in a day. And if you can shoot for somewhere in the ballpark of 60 or more grams, then you're probably getting enough. Any questions on protein?
I would imagine there's some protein that's pretty high in sugar, and we're becoming more and more aware of the grams of sugar that we're eating in our food daily.
Right.
So that kind of gets sort of complicated sometimes when we have to start looking at the salt, the sugar, the
Right.
protein.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you have a piece of meat and you put barbecue sauce on it, you're putting sugar with your protein.
Sure.
If you have a yogurt, you're going to get some natural milk sugar with your protein. If you have a sweetened yogurt, you're going to get some added sugar with your protein. Yeah. Yes,
I've noticed the Greek yogurt is really high in protein,
that's correct.
especially the plain Greek yogurt. It has like 23 grams of protein.
Right. I've noticed too a lot more people using the Greek yogurt instead of sour cream in
Yes.
dips and on their potatoes.
It's delicious. We do that at our house.
It's nice and thick and creamy.
You just change your mindset that it's sour cream.
Not the green cheesecake, there's always fruit in it.
Right? Has anyone tried the Greek yogurt? Do you like it? It's a pretty good product. Yeah. I've seen some Greek yogurts that have that same more than 20 grams of protein, just like you would from a 3-ounce piece of meat or a scoop of protein powder. And it's really great in smoothies, makes them very thick. Right?
I'm buying some today.
Very good.
They're always market.
And the vanilla Greek yogurt, That's a great substitute for ice cream. I mean, it's that good and delicious.
Oh, now I'm gonna get one.
Excellent. Well, yes,
What about the protein drinks?
the protein drinks, some of them are mainly pure protein. I've seen some with protein packaged in with some carbohydrates, so that would be more like a meal replacement. If you see very little carbohydrate in your protein drink, you might just want to add some fruit to it or something like that. But there are so many varieties of protein drinks, and some of them, I've even seen some labeled carb steady where they'll have some fiber added. Like the gentleman in the back said about lentils, things like lentil soup. When you put fiber with your carbohydrate and your protein, you have a really nice steady energy supply. You could even make your own protein drinks with a high fiber food and some fruit and some protein powder or the yogurt. Any other questions? Yes?
What if things like kale, kohlrabi, greens, things like that?
Well, those are, usually when we're planning meals, we call them a non-starchy vegetable. They'll have a tiny little bit of carbohydrate and they'll also have a little bit of protein, but they're not as large of a source of those things. There, you just get such a benefit from all the vitamins and minerals and fiber. So they're very beneficial to add to your smoothies.
Okay, so I wasn't sure if we could count them as, I mean, I know we can't count them as carb, but I didn't know if they have enough protein to be worthwhile counting.
They'd have a little bit, but I would probably add a food more rich in protein to a meal or snack if you want a significant source.
I put kale in the lentil soup as well.
That sounds good.
It's amazing.
Very good. Well, that is everything I had planned to talk about today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Really. I mean, even if you think you know these things, you don't. When you go home and you read this one, this goes by.
Thank you.
It's true though. You forget, yeah. Get lazy or we just don't think about it.
Right, and then we can know it, and then right here we have